It was another one of those nights, the kind that felt like a cruel prank played by time itself. I woke up suddenly at 2:17 a.m., my heart pounding as if it were trying to escape my chest. The room was pitch black, so silent that even the faint hum of the refrigerator downstairs seemed deafening. My mind raced with questions. Was something wrong? Why couldn't I fall back asleep? Every toss and turn only deepened the frustration, each minute stretching into what felt like an eternity. This wasn't just insomnia. It was a battle against myself, a war between my exhausted body and my overactive brain. The more I tried to force sleep, the further it slipped away from me. Hours passed, or maybe it was only minutes. In that state, time had no meaning, and panic began to creep in. What if this never ended? What if every night became a repeat of this torment? I couldn't shake the thought that these endless sleepless nights might be shortening my life, stealing precious years from me without warning. Would this exhaustion lead to something worse? A heart attack, memory loss, or worse yet, an early grave? The fear gnawed at me, relentless and suffocating. And then there were the mornings after, those dreadful mornings when I dragged myself out of bed feeling like a ghost of who I used to be. No amount of coffee could chase away the fog clouding my mind or the heaviness weighing down my limbs. It wasn't just fatigue, it was despair. Friends and family would say things like, "It's normal for older people to sleep less," but their words offered little comfort. How could anyone expect me to accept this as normal when it felt like my very vitality was being drained away? But amidst the chaos, I realized something critical. I wasn't alone in this struggle. Millions of others over 70 face similar battles with sleep. That knowledge didn't make the nights easier, but it gave me hope, a flicker of light in the darkness, that perhaps there was a way to reclaim control. Maybe I didn't have to surrender to this new reality entirely. After all, every great transformation begins with understanding the problem. It was during one of those restless nights, staring at the glowing red numbers on my alarm clock, 2:37 a.m., that I stumbled upon what felt like the lifeline I desperately needed. A video about sleep patterns for older adults mentioned something called the golden window for bedtime, 9 o'clock p.m. to 10 p.m. At first, it sounded absurd. How could such a simple adjustment possibly make any difference? But the more I listened, the more intrigued I became. The experts in the video explained how our bodies naturally align with this time frame as we age, thanks to changes in melatonin production and circadian rhythms. It wasn't just some random suggestion. It was backed by years of scientific research. They claim that going to bed within this golden hour could transform fragmented, restless sleep into deep, restorative rest. My heart raced, not from anxiety this time, but from hope. Hmm. Could this really be the answer to my months-long battle with insomnia? But then reality hit me like a freight train. Adjusting my bedtime meant completely overhauling my nightly routine. For years, I had grown accustomed to staying up late, watching TV until midnight or later. Those hours were mine, a sacred escape from the stresses of life. Sitting in front of the screen, wrapped in a blanket, sipping tea while indulging in reruns of old sitcoms, had become my way of decompressing after long days. And now I was supposed to give that up? To go to bed before 10 p.m.? The thought alone made my chest tighten with resistance. What would I do instead? Sit in silence? Stare at the ceiling? The idea seemed unbearable. The internal struggle began almost immediately. One evening, I sat glued to the couch halfway through an episode of my favorite show. The clock ticked closer to 9:30 p.m., and guilt started creeping in. You should turn it off, a voice inside me whispered. This is your chance to fix everything. But another part of me rebelled. Just one more episode, I reasoned. What's the harm? That night, I stayed up past midnight again, only to wake up 3 hours later drenched in sweat, heart pounding, and unable to fall back asleep. By morning, I felt like a zombie, exhausted, irritable, and defeated. The breaking point came when Evelyn, my neighbor whom I'd confided in about my struggles, shared her own story. She told me how she too had resisted the idea of sleeping earlier, clinging to her late night habits despite knowing they weren't working anymore. It's not easy, she admitted, her eyes softening with understanding. But you have to ask yourself, are those extra hours worth feeling miserable all day? Her words lingered in my mind, gnawing at me. Was I willing to sacrifice my health and well-being for the sake of a few episodes of television? That same night, I decided to take the plunge. As the clock struck 9:15 p.m., I forced myself to turn off the TV, even though every fiber of my being screamed in protest. I shuffled to my bedroom, feeling awkward and out of place, like I was betraying my own identity. Lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling, waiting for sleep to come. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours, and frustration bubbled up inside me. Maybe this was a mistake. Maybe I wasn't cut out for this new schedule. But then, something unexpected happened. Around 9:45 p.m., I noticed my eyelids growing heavy. A wave of calm washed over me, unlike anything I'd felt in months. Before I knew it, I drifted off to sleep and stayed asleep. When I woke up the next morning, I couldn't believe how refreshed I felt. It was as if someone had flipped a switch, turning off the constant exhaustion that had plagued me for so long. For the first time in ages, I greeted the day with energy and clarity. Still, the transition wasn't without its challenges. There were nights when the pull of the TV was too strong, tempting me to revert to my old ways. Each time I reminded myself of the toll those late nights had taken on my body and mind. Slowly but surely, the new routine began to feel less foreign and more natural. I discovered joy in quieter evenings, reading books I'd neglected, journaling, or simply sitting by the window and reflecting on the day. These moments brought a sense of peace I hadn't realized I'd been missing. Looking back, embracing the golden window felt like unlocking a secret code to better living. It wasn't just about sleep, it was about reclaiming control over my life. Every small victory reinforced my determination to stick with it, no matter how uncomfortable it felt at first. Because deep down, I knew this wasn't just about surviving. It was about thriving. It was exactly 2 weeks after I committed to adjusting my bedtime, a decision that at first felt almost impossible. The clock struck 8:45 a.m., and there I sat in the sterile white room of Dr. Miller's office, clutching the armrests of the chair as if they were lifelines. My heart pounded wildly, not from fear this time, but from anticipation. Today was the day I'd find out whether those small changes, going to bed by 9:30 p.m., resisting late-night TV binges, and embracing quieter evenings, had made any real difference. A nurse walked in with a clipboard, her expression unreadable. "We'll check your blood pressure now," she said calmly. I closed my eyes, bracing myself for whatever came next. When Dr. Miller entered the room moments later, his eyebrows shot up in surprise. "Your numbers are significantly better," he announced, his voice tinged with disbelief. "Your systolic pressure has dropped by 20 points, And your diastolic is down too. He paused, flipping through the chart. This kind of improvement usually takes months of medication adjustments, not just 2 weeks of changing sleep habits. Relief washed over me like a tidal wave. For months, I had lived with the constant threat of high blood pressure looming over me like a storm cloud. Just 6 weeks earlier, I had nearly collapsed in the grocery store aisle, clutching my chest as dizziness overwhelmed me. That incident left me shaken, terrified that my body was failing me. Now, sitting here, hearing these words, I felt like I'd been given a second chance. But it wasn't just about the numbers on the monitor. It was what happened afterward that truly astonished me. As Dr. Miller continued reviewing my progress, I suddenly found myself recalling details I hadn't thought about in years. Memories flooded back. The smell of fresh baked cookies from my grandmother's kitchen, the sound of rain tapping against the window during childhood summers, even the exact color of the dress I wore to my high school graduation. These fragments of my past, once buried under layers of mental fog, now seemed vivid and alive. Tears welled up in my eyes as I realized how much I'd lost without even noticing. It was as though a veil had been lifted, revealing parts of myself I feared were gone forever. Dr. Miller noticed my emotional reaction and leaned forward, his tone softening. "This isn't uncommon," he explained. "Improved sleep doesn't just lower blood pressure, it enhances memory consolidation and cognitive function. You're likely experiencing the benefits of deeper, more restorative rest." His words hit me like a revelation. All those nights spent tossing and turning, feeling trapped in a cycle of exhaustion, it had all led to this moment. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was thriving. The transformation didn't stop there. During our conversation, Dr. Miller pulled out a list of medications I'd been prescribed over the years. One by one, he began crossing them off. "With results like these, we can reduce some of your prescriptions," he said, his pen hovering over the page. "Maybe even eliminate a few entirely." My jaw dropped. For years, I'd relied on pills to manage my hypertension, anxiety, and insomnia. They were part of my daily routine, a reminder of the ailments I couldn't escape. Hearing that I might no longer need them felt surreal, as if I'd stepped into an alternate reality where I was finally free. As I left the clinic that afternoon, sunlight streaming through the trees, I couldn't help but reflect on how far I'd come. Just weeks ago, I was a prisoner to my own body, held captive by fatigue, forgetfulness, and fear. Now I walked with a spring in my step, my mind clearer than it had been in years. Evelyn, my neighbor, greeted me later that evening. When I shared the news, her face lit up with excitement. "I told you it would work," she exclaimed. "Sleep really is the key to everything." That night, as I settled into bed at my new earlier hour, I marveled at the journey. What started as a reluctant experiment had turned into a life-altering breakthrough. Sleep wasn't just a necessity, it was a healer, a restorer, a gift, and I vowed never to take it for granted again. It was a moment frozen in time, the kind that feels like it could alter the course of your life. I sat in Dr. Miller's office, my palms slick with sweat as the nurse wrapped the blood pressure cuff around my arm. The room seemed unnaturally quiet, the hum of the fluorescent lights above almost deafening. My heart pounded, not from excitement, but from a cocktail of fear and anticipation. This was the day I would find out if the changes I'd made, going to bed by 9:30 p.m., resisting the pull of late-night TV, and embracing a quieter evening routine had actually worked. Just 2 weeks earlier, I had been on the brink of disaster. A sudden dizzy spell at the grocery store had sent me stumbling into a shelf, clutching my chest as my vision blurred. It was a wake-up call, one I couldn't ignore. My blood pressure had been dangerously high, and for days afterward, I lived in fear of what might happen next. Would I collapse again? Was my body giving up on me? Now, as the cuff tightened around my arm, I braced myself for the worst. But then Dr. Miller walked in, his face unreadable as he glanced at the monitor. "Your numbers have improved significantly," he said, his voice steady but tinged with disbelief. "Your systolic pressure has dropped by 20 points, and your diastolic is down too." He paused, flipping through my chart. This level of improvement, it's rare, especially in just 2 weeks. Relief crashed over me like a tidal wave. For months, I had been living under the shadow of hypertension, dreading each new reading, each new warning from my doctor. And now, sitting here, hearing those words, I felt like I'd been pulled back from the edge of a cliff. But the surprises didn't stop there. As Dr. Miller continued reviewing my progress, something extraordinary happened. Memories I hadn't thought about in years began flooding back. I suddenly recalled the exact shade of blue on my mother's favorite dress, the one she wore to my high school graduation. I remembered the smell of her perfume, the sound of her laughter as she hugged me that day. These details, once buried under layers of mental fog, now felt vivid and alive. Tears welled up in my eyes as I realized how much I had lost without even noticing. It was as though a veil had been lifted, revealing pieces of myself I feared were gone forever. Dr. Miller noticed my emotional reaction and leaned forward, his expression softening. "This isn't uncommon," he explained. "Improved sleep doesn't just lower blood pressure, it enhances memory consolidation and cognitive function. You're likely experiencing the benefits of deeper, more restorative rest." His words hit me like a revelation. All those nights spent tossing and turning, feeling trapped in a cycle of exhaustion, it had all led to this moment. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was thriving. The transformation didn't stop there. During our conversation, Dr. Miller pulled out a list of medications I'd been prescribed over the years. One by one, he began crossing them off. "With results like these, we can reduce some of your prescriptions," he said, his pen hovering over the page. "Maybe even eliminate a few entirely." My jaw dropped. For years, I'd relied on pills to manage my hypertension, anxiety, and insomnia. They were part of my daily routine, a reminder of the ailments I couldn't escape. Hearing that I might no longer need them felt surreal, as if I'd stepped into an alternate reality where I was finally free. As I left the clinic that afternoon, sunlight streaming through the trees, I couldn't help but reflect on how far I'd come. Just weeks ago, I was a prisoner to my own body, held captive by fatigue, forgetfulness, and fear. Now I walked with a spring in my step, my mind clearer than it had been in years. Evelyn, my neighbor, greeted me later that evening. When I shared the news, her face lit up with excitement. "I told you it would work," she exclaimed. "Sleep really is the key to everything." The first night I committed to adjusting my bedtime. A storm brewed, not outside, but within me. As the clock ticked closer to 9 o'clock p.m., I found myself locked in an internal battle that felt as intense as any life or death decision. My stomach growled loudly, protesting the absence of its usual late-night snack, a greasy slice of pizza or a bowl of buttery popcorn that had been my nightly indulgence for years. You can't just take this away from me, a voice inside screamed. It wasn't just food. It was comfort, familiarity, a ritual I clung to like a lifeline during those quiet hours before bed. But now, every fiber of my being rebelled against the idea of giving it up. The thought of going to bed without that final taste of satisfaction felt unbearable, like losing a piece of myself. Then came the second hurdle, Ikarum, prying myself away from the glowing screen of my phone. At 8:45 p.m., I stared at the device in my hand, torn between scrolling through social media one last time and placing it on the charger. Each notification seemed to mock me, tempting me with promises of entertainment and connection. What harm could 15 more minutes do? I reasoned, even though deep down I knew better. Every click, every swipe felt like a betrayal of the new path I was trying to forge. When I finally forced myself to put the phone down, an unsettling emptiness settled over me. Without the comforting hum of endless updates, the silence pressed heavily against my ears, amplifying my doubts. Was I truly ready for this? Could I really endure weeks or months of such restraint? But perhaps the most painful conflict came when my son walked into the living room just as I was preparing to head to bed. "Why are you going to sleep so early?" he asked, his tone laced with confusion and frustration. "We always watch TV together after dinner. This is our thing." His words struck a chord, stirring guilt and uncertainty within me. For years, these shared evenings had been sacred, a rare opportunity to bond amidst our busy lives. Now I was disrupting that rhythm, not just for myself, but for him too. "It's not permanent," I tried to explain, though my voice wavered under the weight of his disappointment. "I need to make this change for my health." He didn't respond, but the look in his eyes said everything. He thought I was abandoning something we both cherished. As the days turned into weeks, another fear began to creep in, the gnawing dread of failure. What if all this effort amounted to nothing? What if, despite my best intentions, I couldn't stick to the new routine? These thoughts haunted me each night as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling while my mind replayed every misstep. One evening, after accidentally staying up past my designated bedtime, I felt a wave of shame wash over me. Had I already ruined everything? Would my body ever adapt to this foreign schedule? Yet, amid the turmoil, there were small victories. On the third night, I resisted the urge to raid the fridge and instead sipped herbal tea while reading a book. The next day, I woke up feeling slightly less groggy than usual, a tiny triumph that fueled my determination. Slowly, I began to see glimmers of hope piercing through the fog of resistance. In the end, it all came down to one defining moment, a choice that would either anchor me to my old restless life or set me free into a future of vitality and hope. I stood at the edge of that decision, trembling with both fear and determination. Changing decades-old habits felt like trying to steer a ship through a storm, each wave threatening to pull me back into the chaos of sleepless nights and endless fatigue. But deep within me burned an unyielding resolve. I thought about Evelyn, whose courage to embrace the golden window had transformed her life, and Mr. Jack, who once struggled under the weight of memory loss and exhaustion but now thrived with newfound energy. Their stories weren't just inspiration, they were proof that change was possible, even in the face of resistance. I imagine waking up every morning not dreading the day ahead, but greeting it with clarity and purpose. This vision fueled me, pushing me past the discomfort, the cravings for late-night snacks, and the ache of leaving behind familiar routine. Every small victory, the first night I fell asleep without tossing and turning, the first week I woke up feeling refreshed, became a beacon of hope, lighting the path forward. I realized this wasn't just about better sleep. It was about reclaiming my life from the shadows of aging and illness. So to anyone standing where I once stood, caught between doubt and possibility, I urge you, take that step. Prioritize your sleep as if your very existence depends on it, because in many ways it does. For older adults especially, sleep isn't merely rest. It's restoration, resilience, and renewal. Don't let another night slip away into fragmented dreams and weary mornings. Embrace the golden hour, trust the process, and watch as your world transforms one peaceful night at a time.